Welcome, everyone. Today we're diving into one of the more provocative discussions out there, where Professor Jeffrey Sachs lays out his perspective on the US Iran war.
I'm ready for this. So, what caught your attention from his breakdown?
Well, for starters, the way Sachs touches on Benjamin Netanyahu's dream of fueling conflict is quite striking.
Yeah,
He paints a picture of a strategic agenda that's more about power plays than defense.
and that immediately ties into the narrative about who really benefits from these conflicts, right?
Exactly. Sachs points to how conspiracy and political aspirations seem intertwined here. It's like he's saying the whole setup around this war it's like designed to justify certain geopolitical maneuvers. It makes you wonder how much of it is
Right.
premeditated.
And then there's the segment on Donald Trump. What happened to his influence in this whole saga?
Yeah, that's a big one. Sachs questions what happened with Trump, almost suggesting that his era might have inadvertently set some foundational
Yeah,
dynamics in motion. It's like there's a ripple effect from his policies that still echoes in these conflicts.
I mean, if you think about it, the discussion really shifts with the topic of the US trying to undermine Iran's nuclear program, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Sachs raises the question, did the US actually cripple Iran's nuclear ambitions? And he basically argues that while there's been damage, it wasn't exactly the robust strike some might claim. Instead, it seems like there was more of a calculated setback than a full blown incapacitation.
That's interesting. It's almost as if the US was trying to signal strength without completely destabilizing the region.
Exactly. And while that might sound like a warning, Sachs also dives into Iran's true position in the Middle East. It's like he says that Iran has always been striving for its own strategic independence, while at the same time navigating complex alliances. It's a
Right
balancing
on.
act that's as old as time.
And speaking of balance, there's that assertion about Iran never really wanting nuclear weapons in the first place. How do you see that fitting into the larger narrative?
That part's fascinating. Sachs argues that, contrary to popular media narratives, Iran has not actively chased nuclear weapons. It seems more like a defensive posture, a method of ensuring national security than an offensive drive. Kind of like investing in bulletproof vests rather than planning battle strategies.
But then, there's the whole idea of America's repeated conflicts. He lists 7 wars in the Middle East. That's a lot to unpack.
For sure, Sachs criticizes the US for its almost habitual involvement in conflicts there. It's like he says these wars have created a cycle of intervention that often leads to more instability than resolution.
Yeah,
It's a cycle that seems, frankly, unsustainable over the long haul.
I have to ask though, don't you think Sachs might be overstating the case a bit? I mean, isn't there evidence that US intervention sometimes does lead to strategic successes?
That's a fair point. I mean, it's true that there have been some short term gains. But Sachs is more concerned with the bigger picture, the long term repercussions, and the way these actions fuel further resentment and conflict. The cycle of war, as he puts it, creates more challenges down the road.
Right, and that brings us to the segment on regime change. Was regime change always the end game for the US with Iran?
According to Sachs, it seems like regime change has been a persistent undercurrent in US strategy. But he raises an essential question. Is it even a viable or ethical goal? Attempting
I
to
mean,
force
yeah,
a new regime often causes more harm than good.
and it's not just about internal politics, right? It affects global stability overall.
Exactly. Sachs delves into how these strategies not only destabilize Iran, but the entire Middle East region. It's like a domino effect. Disrupt one part, and the rest of the pieces start to crumble. The unintended collateral damage is huge.
So, how does Sachs suggest we navigate this quagmire? What should America do differently in the Middle East, based on his analysis?
He does put forward some alternative perspectives. Rather than aggressive military posturing, Sachs advocates for a more balanced diplomatic approach that acknowledges the multipolar realities of today's world,
Yeah,
sort of stepping back and letting regional powers take more responsibility.
that sounds, well, almost idealistic in a way, considering the complexity of US foreign policy.
It does, right? But his point is that the current approach of constant intervention has clearly worked its way into a corner. He seems to be suggesting that without a fundamental shift, the cycle will just continue.
And it's not like there's a single solution here, everything is so interlinked. Don't you think there are risks in scaling back too quickly?
Absolutely, and that's the challenge. Sachs isn't saying just pack it up and leave, but rather to recalibrate and invest in long term stability and diplomacy. It's a gradual process, it's like slowly shifting gears
Yeah,
rather than hitting a complete stop, progressive adjustment rather than all or nothing.
it's interesting how he ties all these strands together: the strategic ambitions, nuclear debates, and the broader policy mistakes.
For sure. What strikes me is how Sachs uses these components to argue that the current US posture is not just about power, but also about a misguided attempt to control outcomes in an increasingly multipolar world. It's a wake up call for policymakers.
Honestly, it almost feels like the narrative forces us to consider a fundamental shift in how power is projected globally.
Exactly. And while not every viewer may agree with every point, Sachs's method of linking historical patterns with current policy shortfalls really pushes you to question the status quo.
Yeah,
It challenges conventional thinking.
and do you reckon that his approach could actually influence public opinion or policy decisions?
It might. I mean, when you bring in a figure like Sachs, whose analysis spans decades, it lends weight to those critiques. There's this persuasive element that suggests if we re examine our strategies, we might avoid more destructive cycles in the future. The idea that history is repeating itself if we don't learn from it.
It's quite a call for introspection on the part of the US, isn't it? Considering the implications for both domestic policy and international relations.
Absolutely. And despite some points appearing a bit idealistic or even overly critical of past actions, Sachs forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about continuous intervention.
Yeah,
Not all feedback is easy to swallow, but it's necessary.
and it leaves us with the big question: how can America pave a more constructive path forward in the Middle East without falling into the traps of past missteps?
That's the $1 million question, right? Sachs seems to advocate for a diplomacy first approach, one that prioritizes sustainable regional engagements over short term military triumphs. It's about building lasting alliances, not just imposing control.
Sure, and while there's an inherent risk in any large scale policy shift, the alternative seems even riskier: the perpetual cycle of conflict and chaos.
Exactly. At the end of the day, Sachs's insights are not just criticisms, but a blueprint for rethinking US strategy in a world that is no longer unipolar.
Yeah,
It's a clarion call for change.
well, that certainly leaves us thinking about our own roles as global citizens and how geopolitical decisions impact us all.
Absolutely. Whether you agree or disagree with every premise, the discussion opens up essential debates about power, ethics, and long term stability in international relations. Something we all need to reflect on.
Thanks for this deep dive. It's been a thought provoking conversation that really underscores the complexities behind what we see in the news.
No problem at all. Let's keep challenging these narratives and asking the tough questions. Until next time.